Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to the Social Climbing series. And in this episode, I want to talk about how to handle being on a pedestal. So, I did some videos about how pretty women get treated like celebrities. So, being on a pedestal, it is kind of like being famous in a way. You have people talking about you, they're speculating about you. And if you think about fame, like being on a pedestal will actually spiritually test you about your relationship with fame. I mean, I'm not really a spiritual type of person, but that's the best way I can describe it. It's almost like you have this forced fame or this forced popularity that you didn't necessarily ask for. You're thrust into the spotlight as a girl that's on the pedestal. So, one of the questions you can ask yourself is, how does a pedestal feel to you right now? How does that fame or popularity feel to you? Is it exciting? Is it intimidating, or is it a mix of both? Because those are some of the questions I've asked myself with having been put on a pedestal for whatever reason. Like, how does it feel? Do I like this pedestal? Because I will admit, there is an exciting aspect to being put on a pedestal. Let's say you have pretty privilege. It could be any sort of privilege, wealth privilege, popularity. As far as what's exciting, it is having people acknowledge you, having people celebrate you. Being celebrated. Maybe you have a lot of fun and exciting events to go to. I think that's the fun part of being on a pedestal. We tend to talk about the downsides of the privileges, but I do want to talk about the positive sides. So, how does fame feel to you? How does popularity feel to you? Is it exciting? Does it make you scared? Like, is it both? One of the most exciting things to me about some of the pedestals is that you get access to things that others don't get access to. So maybe you get free stuff, like pretty privilege. You could get like free drinks, free invites to certain places. You go to the VIP or something. Maybe a lot of people go out of their way to help you. I think that is one of the exciting parts of being on a pedestal. You get helped first. Oh my God, I forgot to tell the story time. I'll probably tell it on the Patreon. But yeah, maybe you go into a restaurant, you get helped first. People rush to help you. People are rushing to give you directions. They're fighting to hold the door for you. So that is one of the aspects of being put on a pedestal that I think can be exciting, and just kind of like having access to experiences that a lot of people don't have access to. Think about whatever you consider the soft life to be. Do you associate the soft life with being underprivileged? No. The soft life is something I think of privileged women having. So whether they have wealth privilege, pretty privilege, doesn't matter what kind of privilege, but I feel like privilege is actually what leads you to that quote unquote soft life. So the exciting part of being on a pedestal is that you have access to almost like this dream life or like a fantasy life in some aspects, to where you get people kind of pampering you. Maybe people at your job, maybe they rush to help you with your work tasks. I know that that's something I used to do. I used to use my privilege for that at previous jobs. Like, guys would help me with certain work tasks. So then it's like, you're still getting paid the same, but you're working less. You get to rest. You can rest on whatever the privilege is. I think that's what a lot of people get the most upset about, but that's what the privilege is. You get to rest on the fact that you're pretty. So maybe you don't have to really wear makeup. Maybe you don't have to really have a cute outfit on. You look pretty in sweats. People are complimenting you when you're wearing sweats because you're kind of just resting in your beauty. You're kind of resting in your natural beauty. So you didn't have to spend 5 hours getting ready. That's a part of pretty privilege. You don't have to spend 5 hours getting ready. You don't have to spend 3 hours just to do your makeup to cover up all these blemishes or to recontour and reshape your whole face. So I think another exciting part that you will experience if you attain a new pedestal, or if you start to embrace whatever your pedestal is, that's one of the exciting parts, is that you get to rest where other people have to labor. Other people have to do a lot of labor so that they can look thin, or, maybe they have to do a lot of labor. Maybe they have to starve themselves for a whole month to get your type of body. But a part of your body privilege, having thin privilege, is that no, you can eat the slice of pizza. You can eat the slice of cake. So there's almost a sense of relaxation that comes with a pedestal. I love psychoanalyzing this type of stuff. I love psychoanalyzing privilege, kind of dissecting what it feels like so that you can know how to navigate it, because A lot of women on this channel, you either have privilege or you just found out that you had privilege, or for the first time in your life, you're actually embracing whatever your privileges are. And so you want to know how to navigate that privilege, how to navigate that pedestal. So feeling appreciated and feeling seen, that is something that I do value a lot about my pedestal. I do value the positive attention that I receive from my pedestals because it does feel nice to be appreciated. For example, having intelligence privilege. Yes, it feels nice for people to compliment my intelligence. It feels nice for people to say that I have good talking points and for me to not be dismissed. So that's a positive aspect of your pedestal. You're being seen. You're not just being seen, you're actually being loved. It's almost like a small way of receiving love. You're experiencing love, you're experiencing being appreciated for whatever your quality is that is giving you the pedestal. So I want you to think about your privilege. You can focus on any privilege for this video because I'm not focusing on any specific ones. But what does that pedestal feel like to you? What is exciting about that particular privilege? What's exciting about that? Like with pretty privilege, actually, something that's exciting about pretty privilege, in my opinion, is you get to experiment with your beauty. That's my favorite thing about pretty privilege. I love like getting inspired to wear different outfits or to do a different hairstyle and knowing that I'm going to look cute. I don't have to worry. Like, I think that's an aspect of pretty privilege is feeling excited to explore that privilege. You're excited to see how society reacts to you, or you're excited to go to different spaces with your pretty outfits on or your pretty hair, or, you know, like growing your hair out, having long hair privilege. Maybe you're excited to try a new style. You haven't done space buns or a half up, half down with your hair this long. So now you're going to try out the style. So that's another exciting aspect of having privilege or a pedestal is you get to actually explore it. You get to explore different sides of it because remember, pedestals and privilege are not a monolith either. So there's actually a multifaceted, multidimensional experience even within your privileges. And some people try to use that against us like, oh, well, your privilege isn't the same as so-and-so. Your light-skinned privilege isn't the same as this other white passing person. And it's like, well, so what? Privilege exists on a spectrum anyway, so you get to explore whatever your part of the spectrum is. And as far as what's intimidating, because that's another thing you can ask yourself about your particular privilege or pedestal, what intimidates you about that? How do you feel about this fame that you're accessing or this popularity or this pedestal? Is it intimidating at all? Because maybe you're going to receive more scrutiny. Maybe people are going to be comparing themselves to you more, or maybe you're going to be more of an object of envy. So what is intimidating about that particular privilege? What is it that's making you shy away from it? Like, okay, I don't want to try that. You know, I don't want to be too pretty. Why not? I don't want to do my makeup. I don't want to put on red lipstick. Why not? What's intimidating to you about red lipstick? Do you feel like there's a certain archetype of woman who wears red lipstick and you don't want to be associated with that archetype? Because that is also going to help you navigate your privilege and your newfound pedestal. It's psychoanalyzing yourself and being aware of what intimidates you about that particular pedestal. Like, okay, do I want this beauty pedestal? I know something that actually intimidated me before, and this is with thin privilege, like with getting down to the point where you have a six-pack and stuff. Part of what intimidates me about six-packs is having to maintain it. Like, okay, now people are going to kind of know me as the girl with the washboard abs or the girl with the six-pack. Can I maintain this? So that is something that people get intimidated by with their privilege. Can I maintain this level of privilege? Can I maintain this wealth? Can I maintain this beauty? Can I keep up? It's almost like you feel like you want to keep up with your own privilege, or it's like you want to keep up with others who have that privilege. And some women will try to triangulate that. They'll try to use that against you. So if you have pretty privilege, for example, they'll try to compare you to someone that they think is prettier. And they'll be like, well, you can't keep up with her because she has her boobs done, she has her butt done, she has perfect teeth, everything about her is perfect. So I think one of the intimidating parts of your privilege could be feeling the pressure, whether it's internally or externally, feeling like you need to keep up with other pretty girls or you need to keep up with other smart girls if you have like an intelligence privilege or an education privilege. So you want to psychoanalyze that. You want to start thinking more about that, especially as a woman who's social climbing. You're going to be getting access to all of these newfound privileges. So yes, it's super exciting. It is really exciting to level up and, now you have unlocked wealth privilege, or now you have unlocked pretty privilege, or a different kind of privilege. Maybe you have a fluid beauty standard and you just tried a new makeup look or something, and now you're being treated differently. So, is there anything that's potentially intimidating to you? What is your relationship to privilege? How do you feel about the concept of privilege in general? Does it emotionally dysregulate you to even think of the existence of privileges? Like, does it make you angry to know that some people have certain privileges and others do not? So, does that make you shy away from your own privileges because you don't want to be like them? You don't want to be like those other women who are on a pedestal. You don't want to be like that mean girl cheerleader. You don't want to be like those other pretty girls who are in shape. So maybe you have like this fear of being perceived. It's a fear of being perceived negatively, because that is definitely an intimidating part of being on a pedestal, because anybody who's on the pedestal, anyone who has a platform, obviously people are going to critique it, because it's almost like you become a public figure in a way. When you're the one who's on the pedestal, you are a public figure whether you like it or not. You are seen as the representation for whatever your privileges are. And so there are almost like these stereotypes that come with your privileges. And so sometimes people expect you to act a certain way, or they expect you to have a certain aesthetic. You've heard light-skinned girls talk about this with 4C hair, where it's like because they have the light-skin privilege, people expect them to have a certain aesthetic, or they stereotype them, and then maybe they're shocked when they don't meet that stereotype of those privileges. So is that intimidating to you? Because as you're social climbing and attaining all of these new privileges and privilege stacking, that is something you're going to have to reckon with. Like, how do I feel? How does this pedestal feel to me right now? Is this too much? Is this a little too much visibility for me? Is it making me happy to receive the positive attention? Is the good outweighing the bad? If the good doesn't outweigh the bad, then it's not a privilege. And that's why I say that depending on your environment, your privilege can actually be canceled out. The second question that you can ask yourself on your privilege stacking journey is, what parts of your life have changed since acquiring this new privilege, or since embracing this new privilege? What has changed about your life? Do you perceive yourself differently? Are you walking with a little bit more of a pep in your step? Do other people view you differently ever since you attained this new privilege, or ever since you embraced it? How have your relationships or your daily routine, how has that been affected? Do you perceive other people differently now because now you are aware of your privilege? Because I know that that can be a shock to you. If you have had this privilege all your life and you never really acknowledged it or noticed it, and now you are noticing it, does that affect your relationships now, your family relationship? Have you ever gone back and actually analyzed your relationships with your exes or family members or coworkers, because now you have acknowledged a new privilege about yourself? Or you've discovered that you've had this privilege your whole life and you just never really embraced it or thought about it? What parts of your life have been affected by your privilege? Or if it's a new pedestal that you're on now, what part of your life has changed? Do a lot of people seek your validation now? Because anyone who's on a pedestal, you're going to have people around you who are thirsty for your attention. That's one of the parts of being on a pedestal. People are more thirsty for your attention than they were before. They kind of seek your validation more, so they get angry with you more easily because your opinions matter more. Your opinions carry weight. Your insults carry more weight. Your jokes carry more weight. Your sarcasm carries more weight than it did before, because now you're on this new pedestal. So what parts of your life have changed since being on this pedestal? What parts of your life are different? What part of your daily routine is different now that you're navigating this privilege from a different perspective? Or maybe you just attained that privilege, like wealth privilege or whatever. How is your daily routine different? Do you feel more of like this desire to protect the privilege? Because I know that I feel that desire, like with my body. I'll use my body as an example, or fitness. Or let's say you grow your hair out or something. Maybe you feel more of a need to protect your hair now because it's so long. and you spent so long growing it out. You have worked so much to attain this privilege. Some privileges you're born with, some privileges you attain them. You can purchase certain privileges. You can work to get certain privileges, like wealth privilege, for example. So, how are you emotionally reacting to this pedestal that you're on now? How are you going to maintain that? How are you like what foundation is this pedestal built on? Did you spend years working your way up to it? Do you feel like somebody else has the power to take it away from you, this newfound pedestal? And if so, why? Why do they have the power to take it away from you? Another aspect of navigating being on a pedestal is by examining your personal identity. So, who were you before you were on this pedestal? And who do you want to be now? Were you super insecure before? Did you feel like you were basic before? Maybe you felt like you weren't special? Okay, who do you want to be now? Who is this new pedestalized exotical? Who is this new privileged pretty girl that you're trying to be now? How are you going to navigate this identity shift? What plans do you have for yourself? What strategies are you going to use to navigate this identity shift into being your new pedestalized self? How are you going to navigate that? One of the ways that I navigate identity shifts is I love doing journal prompts. I love asking myself questions or asking you guys questions, kind of brainstorming. So the exotical space is actually set up like a think tank. So all of my content, this is not advice content. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just trying to get your wheels turning so you can begin to think like, how do I want to navigate my different privileges? How do I want to navigate my pedestal? What do I want to do with it? And then, the way a think tank works is we kind of bounce ideas off of each other. We have a lot of polls on this channel. But how do you want to navigate this new identity? Who were you before this pedestal? Like before you were aware of this pedestal, before you were aware of this privilege, or before you attained it, who were you? And who are you now? Can the old self merge with your new self, or do you have to completely transform and completely let go of that old identity? And if you have to let go of your old identity and how you used to identify before the privilege, what are you going to do about those people who used to be around back when you had that old identity? Do you have to cut people off now? Because, this new lifestyle that you're living with this newfound privilege, maybe they don't go with that. Maybe they don't align with that anymore. Speaking of alignment, what type of personal identity aligns with this newfound pedestal that you're on? How are you going to navigate that? Who do you have to be? What qualities do you have to have in order to maintain this level of a pedestal that you now have access to? Do you feel a sense of duty now or a sense of responsibility? Do you feel like you want to speak out for a certain community now with this newfound privilege and pedestal? Because a pedestal is kind of like a stage. It's kind of like having a stage or a platform of some sort. So maybe you have thin privilege, maybe you have pretty privilege, wealth privilege, intelligence privilege. Maybe you're just now acknowledging some sort of black privilege, mixed race privilege, light-skinned or dark-skinned privilege. So how are you going to navigate that aspect of your identity? Or are you attaching these pedestals and privileges to your identity at all? Like, for example, if this pedestal were to go away tomorrow, would you want it back? Are you detached from it? Like, okay, it can go away. Like my wealth privilege that I have, it's okay if it goes away. Or are you like, no, I would like to hold on to this? Because there's no wrong answer. So some people, they want to maintain or hold on to their privileges that they do have, such as wealth privilege. I know a lot of people, they want to keep their wealth or they want to grow it even more. So they actually want a bigger wealth pedestal, if that makes sense. They kind of want to build their platform or their foundation of wealth, because a pedestal is kind of like a foundation or something, or like a stage. Think of an actual structure. I'm thinking of an actual structural pedestal. So let's say you have wealth privilege. Would you like to keep that wealth, grow that wealth? Maybe you're just trying to protect it. You just don't want to lose it. Do you want to have a new lifestyle? So who are you now? Who were you before this pedestal? Who were you before this privilege? And who do you want to be now? Another question is, what aspects of your true self do you want to hold on to despite the attention from this pedestal and despite the pressures that come with this pedestal? So for example, are there any aspects of your identity to where it's like, okay, no matter what, I'm never going to change this aspect of my identity? No matter how many pedestals I get, no matter how many privileges I have, I'm never going to change this particular quality about myself. What quality is that? And how can you incorporate that personality trait into your newfound life with your pedestal? So, for example, I always have identified as a productive person. I'm always going to be a productive person. I'm never going to change that about my identity. No matter how wealthy I become, no matter how big the exotical channel becomes, I'm always going to be productive. So how can I incorporate that into this life with my new pedestal? How can I make sure to keep that aspect of my identity? Because some people have these very fluid identities, kind of like me. They have these fluid identities, these transient identities. So they're very easily able to take on certain qualities or wash certain qualities off. And then there are these other people who have kind of more of this static identity where it's like, no, I'm staying the same regardless. I'm going to have the same personality that I've always had. I'll have the same values that I always have had. So are there any personal values that you had to trade in? Are there any mindsets that you had to give up to attain this particular pedestal? For example, if you have thin privilege now, maybe you had to give up the mindset of eating like somebody who weighs 300 pounds. You had to give up the overweight mindset so that you could take on the skinny mindset. Another question you can ask yourself to navigate your pedestal is, what parts of yourself do you feel are being celebrated on this pedestal? And are there parts of yourself you feel are being overlooked now? Like, do you feel misunderstood because of this pedestal that you have? Have you ever felt misunderstood because you're mixed, or misunderstood because you're light skinned? Whatever the perceived pedestal is, have you ever felt misunderstood because of it? And are you okay with that? Are you okay with constantly being misunderstood? Is the trade-off worth it? Is it worth trading off understanding and belonging so that you can have this newfound pedestal and kind of like navigate through life on this new platform that you have, or this new privilege? Which one is more important to you? Do you care about the belonging, or do you care about the particular privilege that you want? Because that's one of the main social shaming tactics that people use against those who acquire new privileges. If you get a new privilege, for example, thin privilege, let's say you were fat and all your friends were fat and then you became skinny. Now they don't want to be friends with you. So now you have actually sacrificed belonging and connection for your newfound privilege of being thin. So do you like doing stuff like that? Is it for the best, or are you one of those people who would rather fit in? So which pedestal is the most important to you? Is it belonging, popularity? That's a form of a pedestal. Safety and belonging and being popular, having a lot of friends, that is definitely a form of a pedestal. Or your thin privilege. Which pedestals are worth giving up? Which privileges are worth giving up in exchange for a new privilege? Do you believe that you can upgrade privileges? For example, maybe you no longer value pretty privilege. Actually, a lot of women do this when they have kids or when they get a career, when they get middle-aged. A lot of women stop valuing pretty privilege and they exchange it for wealth privilege or something else, intelligence privilege. Some people view privilege on a hierarchy, so they think that being smart is the most important, or being pretty is the most important. So do you believe in some sort of privilege hierarchy? I personally don't believe in a privilege hierarchy. When I get older, I will still maintain my pretty privilege because pretty privilege is just as important to me as all of the other ones. But that's just because I happen to have a fluid identity in general. I'm very fluid and transient in my identity, but everybody's not like that, and that's okay. One's not better than the other. So for some people, they're willing to trade in one privilege for another. They're willing to trade in one pedestal for another because, maybe they are moving to a new location, or maybe they feel like the other privilege will help them more than the previous one that they had. The next thing I want to get into with how to navigate your pedestal and how to navigate your privilege is setting boundaries. So how do you currently feel about your privacy? Because if you have any form of privilege or any pedestal, having a pedestal means that you're going to start lacking in privacy because, again, it's kind of like living your life on a stage. It's like being famous in a way. It's like being a celebrity on a very small scale. So celebrities constantly get their privacy invaded. Are you willing to sacrifice part of your privacy so you can attain this new pedestal? I'm also thinking about women who get plastic surgeries, women who change something about their physical appearance. It could be plastic surgery, makeup, a weave, a new hair color. Are you willing to have your privacy invaded so that you can have this newfound hair color or this newfound beauty and the pedestal that comes with that? Because people will be asking questions about your newfound beauty. They'll be asking like, oh, wow, did you get a facelift? Oh, did you get lipo? Or wow, you lost a lot of weight. So that's something to think about. Setting those boundaries around your pedestal. How do you want to navigate it? Do you want to tell people how you got your pedestal, or do you want to keep it to yourself? Because it's none of their business. It really is none of their business. People are not entitled to your privacy, no matter how popular you are, even celebrities. They don't owe us an explanation. This is why a lot of celebrities don't tell you when they had surgery or who they slept with or who they broke up with, why they broke up. They don't tell you that because they're actually not obligated to sacrifice their privacy. Just because you admire them, it doesn't mean that they owe you an explanation of their own life. So some people, they just want to be able to make their mistakes in private. They want to be able to experiment in private. So how are you going to navigate your newfound pedestal or the pedestal that you just now embraced? How are you going to set your boundaries around that? Do you want to keep that pedestal private? Like you don't want to tell people your business ideas. Maybe you don't want to tell people how you got your hair like that or whatever. You don't want people to touch your hair. That's actually a valid boundary. Even if their hair is real. Some women, they feel like, no, this is a part of my boundary. You know, this is my autonomous sacred space or whatever, so I don't want people touching my hair. So there's no right or wrong way to do your boundaries. But that is something that you will have to navigate with your pedestals is how much am I willing to tell people about this pedestal? Do I want to be the representative or the leader that is supposed to reach back and help others to get on the same pedestal as me? Because that's something else. People start thinking you owe them something when you get the pedestal. So when you get that wealth, when you get that weight loss, suddenly everybody wants free weight loss tips. Suddenly they want you to make a meal plan for them. They want you to make a workout plan for them. They want you to tell them exactly how you did it. But all of the girls on the pedestal, we don't all just freely give out a step-by-step instruction manual on how to attain a pedestal. Part of the reason why I don't always give out instructions on how to attain a pedestal is because I got there on accident. You know, some pedestals, you didn't ask for it. Maybe you were born a certain way. You know, maybe you were born looking that way, or something just happened to where it was kind of by chance. So that's why some people, they don't really tell you about their pedestals or give instructions. It's because they literally don't have any instructions. So that's one reason. Another reason is because some people, they don't want to have to explain themselves. Some people just don't like explaining themselves, and that's valid. So what are your boundaries going to be around your pedestals? Are you going to explain your pedestals to others? Are you going to give them the blueprint on how you got that pedestal? If it's something that you recently acquired, you know, if you just got this newfound privilege, are you going to try to tell others how to get the privilege and try to like kind of help them, or I guess push them forward to the privilege? Does that even work? Is that even a thing? Another question that I have for the pretty girls is when it comes to your pedestal and your privileges and setting boundaries, what boundaries do you feel you need to set to protect your personal and professional peace? So if you, let's say that you have a newfound pedestal at work, maybe you're the manager now. What boundaries do you need to protect your peace? Do you have to go in the office and close your door now? Do you have to stop answering all these phone calls? How can you protect your peace with this newfound pedestal? The reason that some women come off their pedestals or give them up is because they don't have the peace that they wanted to have on that pedestal. So that's why you see a lot of people, maybe they were famous, for example, and then they fell off and they never came back, or they quit the industry, or they quit the job that they just got, or, you know, they lose weight, but then they don't like all the attention they're getting, so they just go ahead and gain the weight back. They just kind of give up because they didn't have the peace that they thought they would have on that pedestal. So how are you going to protect your peace on this newfound pedestal? Because when you're on a pedestal, you are a target. You're a walking target. So do you have any strategies? What strategies are you going to put in place to protect your peace on this particular pedestal? How are you going to protect your peace with this particular privilege? How are you going to maintain your inner peace knowing that you have this privilege while others don't? How are you going to prevent guilt? That is another question that you have to ask yourself when you're navigating this privileged, pedestalized type of existence. How are you going to navigate guilt? How are you going to prevent guilt? Are you willing to give up this pedestal because of guilt? Some women do. Some women do not use their pretty privilege in any way. So they might be pretty, but maybe they don't put on makeup or anything. Maybe they gain weight and all that because they feel too guilty to actually go ahead and get on their pretty girl pedestal. They don't want the pretty privileged pedestal because, of obvious reasons. Obviously, a lot of pretty women do have some mental health issues. This is why some people say pretty girls are crazy. Well, it's because that pretty girl has been the target of narcissists. She's been the target of sociopaths. She's been the target of psychopaths. So a lot of pretty women, we do become targets. So some women, they choose to just go ahead and not be pretty so they don't have to deal with the drama. So how are you going to navigate the potential drama that could come with your new pedestal? That is something that you want to think about when you're navigating your privileged identity. Another aspect of setting boundaries, another question is, are there specific people or things that have become overwhelming now that you have your new pedestal? So for example, do you now feel overwhelmed by social media? Maybe you started posting on Instagram. Let's say you're a pretty girl and you started posting on Instagram, you started posting TikToks. Now all of a sudden, your friends aren't talking to you. Your boyfriend's accusing you of attention seeking. So are there any specific scenarios that have started to become overwhelming because you have this new pedestal? Or you didn't realize you had it and now you're finally, coming into that identity. You're trying to embrace your beauty. You're trying to kind of show off your beauty, if that makes sense, by making these hair TikToks or whatever you're doing. And now something has become overwhelming. Are there any aspects of your life that are now overwhelming because of your pedestal? So maybe your family doesn't get along with you now. Maybe people are accusing you of being a clout chaser and attention seeker. Maybe people are accusing you of being stuck up or thinking you're all that because you moved out of the hood. Now you live in the privileged neighborhood. So now mama and them who still live in the country, now they're accusing you of thinking you're a little too big for your britches. So what aspects of your pedestal have become overwhelming and how are you going to deal with that? What strategies are you going to put into place so you can deal with those overwhelming feelings? How can you create a space for yourself while still engaging in your public life? Because whether you like it or not, if you have a pedestal, you will have kind of a public persona. Everybody in this world has who they are as a person, and then they have how others perceive them. So how are you going to separate who you are personally and how you're perceived? How are you going to set the line? How are you going to create the boundaries between your personal life and then you on the pedestal? Are you going to be the same exact person 24/7? Are you going to practice selective authenticity? Are you going to gatekeep some of your personal information a bit more because maybe people are prying and people want to expose you? That's another aspect of being on a pedestal. There's always somebody who wants to expose you. When you're on a pedestal, there's always somebody that wants to expose you. Whether you've got pretty privilege, doesn't matter what the privilege is, really. Any privilege you have, somebody wants to expose you. When you get a promotion at work, the first thing a person wants to do is send an email of you making an error. That's the first thing they want to do because you're on the pedestal, so they want to expose you. So are you okay with constantly being exposed or constantly having people attempting to expose you? Are you okay with navigating life filled with snakes? Think of all the snakes that come around when you're on a pedestal. Think of all the snakes you attract. All the people who want to take a piece of your wealth. They want to ruin your beauty. They want to destroy your beauty. Or they want to talk shit about you so they can expose you. Like, oh, I saw her eating some chicken broth for lunch. Oh, she's anorexic. They tell the whole office. Now the whole office thinks that you're anorexic or bulimic because you just lost weight. So now you're on that skinny pedestal and people want to expose you. They want to try to destroy your pedestal. How are you going to navigate that? Can you create space for yourself personally while still being on the pedestal? Where is your safe space going to be? Do you want the pedestal itself to feel safe, or do you want to be able to retreat into some other safe space socially so that you don't have to even think about the pedestal? Because I know that, like, for me, if I think about, like, let's say pretty privilege, that's a form of a pedestal. Sometimes friendships are not a safe space for pretty women because women view you as sexual competition. So, in order to create my own safe space for that pretty girl pedestal, I try to be friends with other women who are also pretty and they've got their own pretty girl pedestals. So, they're not thinking about my pretty girl pedestal because they're maintaining theirs. They're navigating their own safe spaces. So, how are you going to navigate that? Do you want to hang out with other people who also have the same pedestal as you? Or would you rather just be the only one with your pedestal and maybe you get to use that as leverage? One is not better than the other. There is no wrong way to do this. All of this is social constructs, so nobody can argue with me saying that, oh, you're wrong. No, technically I'm not, because this is all subjective. Number 4 is handling attention. What is the hardest part of being in the spotlight? Is it the expectations? Is it the scrutiny? Is it something else? What's the hardest aspect of receiving attention for your pedestal? Is it the fact that, maybe men expect you to act a certain way? Maybe your relationships with men are completely canceled out. Maybe half of your friendships are now gone because of this pedestal. Maybe your own mother doesn't like you now. Your own sisters don't like you anymore. So what's the hardest part of being in this spotlight from your pedestal? What's the hardest part of having this particular privilege? What is the biggest thing where you feel like, oh my God, I wish that I didn't have to deal with this? And if you feel this dread with your privilege, are you willing to give up that privilege, or are you still like, okay, no, I'd rather still keep my privilege, but maybe just use it in a different space? Maybe you need to switch geographical locations. Maybe you need to move or something, or get out of that job, get out of that company, get away from those people who are targeting you. So what's the hardest part of being in the spotlight? The expectations, people talking shit, people criticizing you. How are you going to handle criticism with your newfound pedestal? Because you're definitely going to receive it. That is one of the main, in fact, I would argue that pedestals are built from criticism. That's really what the whole pedestal is. It's people giving their perceptions of you, usually negative. So you have kind of like this dual experience where you've got some people who have a positive perception and some people who have a negative perception of you. The next question that you can ask yourself is, whenever you feel overwhelmed by the attention or the pressure that comes from your particular privilege, what can you do to stay grounded? How are you going to stay strong and not succumb to people peer pressuring you to cake for them? How are you going to stay strong? What self-care practices will help you to reset as a woman with this particular privilege? Because privileged women deserve a safe space too. I don't care what anybody says. So what self-care practices are you going to start doing? Because, now you got this new privilege, you've got this pedestal, and you want to navigate it and you want to utilize it, but at the same time, you want to also stay grounded. You don't want other people to pressure you. Sometimes people will try to pressure you to stop doing what you're doing. They don't want you to be on that pedestal. They'll say to you, oh, you're too skinny. As soon as you get thin privilege, oh, you're too skinny. You look anorexic. You have no ass. Oh, you lost too much weight. So that's actually a form of external pressure. Oh, you're a light-skinned person. You don't want to go in the sun. You're going to look translucent. You're going to look like a ghost. And it's like, okay, they're trying to pressure you to get darker. So are you willing to listen to other people who try to pressure you to change whatever it is about yourself that has acted as a pedestal or a form of privilege? It could be light skin privilege, dark skin privilege, mixed race privilege, wealth privilege, doesn't matter. How are you going to stay grounded in the face of all of this attention? Number 5, dealing with criticism. How do you feel about criticism? Especially when it's harsh or when it's false or when it's true. How do you feel about people pointing out your flaws or something that actually is true about you and, kind of exposing that or defining you based on that negative thing? How do you feel about that? Because that's a part of being on a pedestal. So what strategies are you going to use to separate your self-worth from public opinions? Because think about celebrities. Like I said, if you have privilege, you're treated like how a celebrity is treated. Celebrities have a public self. They have kind of their public image and public images of themselves, and then they have who they are in private. So how are you going to separate your public self, this pedestalized, privileged perception of you? How are you going to separate that from like who you really are? And there is no wrong answer, but that's just something that you will have to think about when navigating being on a pedestal. How are you going to react when people criticize you and say, oh, well, she's not that cute, or she's not even that rich, or she got there by scamming? I've heard a lot of people call business owners scammers. Like, no matter who you are as a business owner, you're a scammer, you're a grifter, you're a fraud. So, how do you feel with starting a business and then people are calling you a fraud? Or they're saying that you're a scammer, or they're saying that your products were a ripoff and they leave bad reviews or something like that. How will you feel about that? I want you to reflect on a recent piece of feedback that you got from somebody else, positive or negative. How did it make you feel to hear other people's opinions about you? Are you one of those people who's easily swayed by others' opinions about you? How do you want to respond to people's opinions of you in the future, whether it's positive or negative? How do you want to respond? Are you somebody who prioritizes how you're perceived? Do you have a fear of being perceived? Because if so, then being on a pedestal is your worst nightmare, because that's all being on a pedestal is. First of all, pedestals are based on perception. Privilege is based on perception. If somebody perceives you as light skinned, you're going to receive light skin privilege. If they perceive you as pretty, you're receiving pretty privilege, etc. If they perceive you as wealthy, you're getting wealth privilege, even if you're not actually wealthy. Look at the people who have nice houses, nice cars, but they're living off debt. But because people perceive them as wealthy, they get treated as wealthy. So how are you going to respond to other people's opinions of you? Do you care about that? Because how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with all of these people just giving their unsolicited advice to you, unsolicited opinions about your privilege and your pedestal? Number 6, staying true to your values. What are the core values and principles that guide you? And do your privileges line up with that? So for me personally, one of my core values is actually beauty. So I don't have I'm not scared, or like I don't feel fake when I'm doing something to beautify myself, because that aligns with my core values. But for some women, beauty is not one of their core values. Maybe they value, I don't know, being a mother and then like being a good employee, and that's it. So being beautiful sounds like something dumb to them. So what are your core values, and do your privileges even line up with that? And if not, how can you make your privileges line up with your core values more? How do you plan to stay aligned with your core values in the face of these privileges and being on this pedestal, getting all this attention, all this fame, all this popularity, essentially? How are you going to keep your core values? Or do your core values need to be changed? Does your pedestal challenge your core values? Maybe you felt like big women who are plus size, maybe you felt like, hey, plus size women get treated the same, but then maybe you lost weight and then you're finding out that that's not true. So your core value or your opinion that you've always had is being challenged. How are you going to deal with that? Something else you can think about too when navigating your pedestal is, how can you use your pedestal in a way that reflects who you are and the impact that you want to have on others? Do you want to have an impact on others, or do you care? I mean, I actually don't view myself as a role model. I do not want to be a role model. That doesn't even sound fun to me. That actually sounds horrible. But for some women, they do want to be a role model. They want to be a role model for their children, for their race, for their phenotype, or whoever. Because, maybe that is their way of creating a legacy or leaving an impact. So how do you want to leave an impact? The way that I leave an impact is not by being a role model, but it's via my art. It's via my creativity. That is my impact. But for other people, maybe their impact is being an actual role model, being a social justice warrior of some sort, kind of standing up for the injustices that they've faced in their community. So is there something that you would like to draw attention to? Is there some cause that you want to use your pedestal on behalf of? I know that for me, I tend to use my pedestals as just a platform for self-expression, and then me expressing myself creatively, that is how I impact others. But for some people, their pedestal, they don't view it as a self-expression. They view it as a responsibility. Like, hey, I have this wealth, so now I'm responsible to help the poor. Now I'm responsible to go back and change my neighborhood or give money to the hood. This is why some people get mad when you don't do that. So there is no wrong answer. One's not better than the other, but that's just proof that people are different. People have different core values. Something else you want to think about when you are navigating your pedestal is gratitude or humility. What are you grateful for as a result of this pedestal? And how can you enjoy this pedestal without losing yourself in the pedestal? So how can you just make sure that this pedestal is as fun as possible? Because that's one of my core values is having fun. What's the point of living if my life sucks? Like, no, I would literally rather be dead than have a life that sucks. I'm just being honest. So one of my core values is fun, having fun in life. So how can you make sure that your pedestal is fun? How can you try to incorporate as much fun as possible? How can you have fun with your pretty privilege, with your wealth privilege, with your intelligence privilege, whatever it is, with your popularity? How can you have fun with that? How can you be playful with that? Also, if you just got a new privilege or you find yourself on a new pedestal, I want you to reflect on something that has helped you to navigate this pedestal. How has that impacted your approach to this pedestal? So, for example, let's say you lost weight with the help of a personal trainer. What did you like about that personal trainer? How did that personal trainer guide you into a new pedestal? And how can you make sure to incorporate more people like that into your life? Because sometimes people actually help us to attain the privilege. They help us to stack the privileges. Other people could help you to attain wealth by being your business partner or whatever. So how has that affected you? What people helped get you where you are? What inspired you to even embrace this pedestal? What inspired you to pursue this pedestal? If it's a new pedestal that you just received, first of all, congratulations. Like, for example, let's say you graduated college. So now you have a newfound pedestal of being an educated woman. Congratulations. So what helped you to graduate college? What helped you to get to where you are in terms of your pedestal? Who helped you? And how can you try to incorporate more people like that in your life? Or if you can't, how can you incorporate those qualities into yourself so that you can attain more pedestals or just enjoy the one that you have? In fact, what do you think about that? What do you think about privilege stacking? Do you think that there is one way to privilege stack? Is there a right or a wrong way to privilege stack for you? What is the ultimate privilege stacking experience for you? How many privileges do you want to have? Do you want to keep on doing it for life, kind of like a lifelong journey? I know that's how I feel. When it comes to like leveling up and stuff, I kind of view it as more of a journey itself as opposed to a destination. I don't feel like, okay, I'm finished, I'm good now. No, I kind of view it like, hey, let me just keep going and see how far I can go with this and kind of play around. And if I fail, that's okay. I can just try again. And then whenever I'm done, I'm done. So for example, with weight loss, obviously you don't want to become super anorexic and unhealthy and malnourished, but you can kind of play around within a healthy weight range and just decide like, okay, how skinny do I want to be? Do I want muscle tone now? Do I want to do body recomposition? So how are you going to play around with your privileges? Is privilege and pedestals, like, are those things a journey for you or is it a lifestyle for you? Or is there any one particular pedestal to where you feel like, okay, as soon as I get this pedestal, I'm done and I'm good. I'm settled for life. Because I know that for every pedestal I get for myself, it kind of opens up and unlocks new dreams within me to where I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so I achieved this, so maybe I'll try something else. Maybe I'll try this now. So maybe I didn't have that desire before, but because I'm on this newfound pedestal, I kind of have a different vantage point. I have a different worldview now on this pedestal. So now I don't think like how I did on the other pedestal, if that makes sense. So as I attain the pedestal, then I kind of reshape my thinking or something. It's almost like the pedestal affects my thinking. And so then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll try to create a Patreon page now. Now that I've got this pedestal of a YouTube channel, maybe I'll try my hand at Patreon. Maybe I'll try my hand at an online course. So do you see how it kind of like, it's like a tree that grows branches? So how do you view your pedestal? Do you view your pedestal kind of like one thing leads to the other? Or do you think that, you're good with one or two things? Or maybe you have pedestal priorities, kind of like in dating. You know how I said you can't perfectly vet in dating? You can only vet for whatever your priorities are. So maybe you view pedestals like that. Like, look, I have my top 5 priorities. If I have these 5, then I'm good. Another thing that you want to think about when you're navigating your pedestal is the future. What are your long-term goals as a person, and in your career? How do you want this pedestal to shape your future, and how do you want it to fit into your personal life? Do you want to be known for this particular pedestal? Do you want to make this pedestal a part of your brand? Is this a part of your long-term goal? Are you just using this pedestal for now and then maybe later you won't care? Because I've met some women like that with pretty privilege. They only want to have pretty privilege when they're single. And then when they get a man, then they let themselves go because they're like, oh, I already got a man, so like I'm good. So their pretty privilege was more male-centered. So once they achieved their prize, the man, then they feel like, oh, I don't have to put in as much effort. So is that how you view your pedestals? Or, and I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm just saying that, one's not better than the other, but that is how some people view their pedestal. Like, okay, once I hit $1 million, then I'm good, or I'll stop there. So what are your long-term goals with your pedestal? How do you envision yourself managing this pedestal years from now? You know how people, they try to shame women? They'll be like, oh, you're going to lose your beauty. No, I'm not, because I've already created a 10-year beauty plan for myself. So I already have thought about how I'm going to maintain my pretty privileged pedestal as the years go on. So for some people, it's like you have to kind of plan it out. So how do you want to maintain this pedestal years from now? Your wealth, your fame, your popularity, your beauty, whatever it is, your thin privilege, how are you going to be thin the rest of your life? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? If you care about legacy, do you think legacy exists? Or do you think that legacy can be built based off of pedestals you already have? What do you want to be known for? That's something else that you can think of. Anyway, those are just some of the questions that you can ask yourself when you're navigating your privileges and living life on a pedestal. What do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.